we went from the Earth to the moon, where is the evidence?
We would have never have met Kennedy's deadline of reaching there and returning by the end of the decade.
Could this have been produced in Hollywood with special effects?
In '69, we landed on the moon.
NASA stands for never a straight answer.
Maybe there was no moon landing.
We are go with Apollo 11. Good luck and Godspeed.
July 20th, 1969. The United States successfully lands the first man on the moon.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But seeing is not always believing. Now, a former FBI agent, a conspiracy theorist and former aerospace consultant, and an American astronaut are all on a mission. They'll question witnesses.
That's the actual report?
That's it.
Pick apart the evidence.
When I saw his name on one of the documents, I was shocked.
Test theories with new experiments.
Oh, it was basically a bomb.
And butt heads.
Look at that, the Apollo landing site.
Looks like evidence of a boulder to me.
To determine once and for all if one of mankind's biggest accomplishments ever really happened.
History isn't always correct. That's what I'm trying to say.
Ooh, wow.
America celebrates being the first to put a man on the moon.
15 indeed for all mankind.
But conspiracy theorists argue there's no way it happened.
Dude, seriously, that sounds fishy.
And they say science is on their side,
Declassified documents right here.
claiming that no human could have made it through the radiation of space
Liftoff on Apollo 11.
to land on the moon alive.
These two intense belts of very highly charged protons are just going to put out so much radiation that it would basically fry the astronauts inside.
But just how far would the U.S. go to beat the Soviets to the moon?
They brought Nazis over to be able to go to the moon.
Look, there's evidence there from the rover tracks.
Excuse me if I'm skeptical.
I was a special agent with the FBI for 4 years, but no one knows NASA like an insider. As an astronaut, Leland Melvin has insight into NASA's capabilities that I could never have.
I want to show you what we're looking at out here. We are flying on STS-122. This is the tail of the Space Shuttle Atlantis.
Look at that, right there. I hate conspiracy theories, and I know that Mike Barra is a big part of the conspiracy community that claim the moon landing never happened.
There are a lot of people in my community who highly doubt whether or not NASA actually landed a man on the moon.
But he was also an aerospace consultant. I think I can convince him once for all that the moon landing really did happen, like we've always known since 1969.
Let's face it, we don't have any visual evidence, any video evidence.
Come on. Come on, dude.
I think I know as much about the moon landings as anybody, and at this point, I'm just as sure I'm right as Leland is.
In the FBI, we follow the leads no matter where they take us, no matter how unpleasant those places may be.
Is there any real evidence that we went to the moon in '69?
Polls have shown that 1 in 20 people don't believe that man ever set foot on the moon. The moon hoax conspiracy theory is real. It's a living, growing thing.
So I've got a guy in Portland that I would like you to meet. He's been one of the people that's been questioning the moon landing scenario for a long time. So who wants to go with me?
I want to go. I want to hear what he has to say. Yes, I want to hear what he has to say. But I also want to use my experience and training to dispute whatever whacked out claims he has to say.
I'm taking Leland to see Clyde Lewis. Clyde's a leading conspiracy theorist and the host of Ground Zero, a nationally syndicated radio talk show. I want Leland to see that conspiracy theorists aren't just tinfoil hat-wearing geeks. Most are extremely intelligent and have done the research to inform their opinions. Clyde could be a real eye-opener for him. For years, he's had a lot of questions about the moon landings, you know, whether it really happened, why we really went.
You know, I really hate this. How do you take visual proof and scientific data and just say it never happened? These conspiracy theories are just crazy.
He's a fairly grounded dude, so that's why I take him seriously.
Grounded is good.
Yeah, we like grounded, right?
Mike and I have very different opinions on what grounded means.
This will be an interesting conversation.
I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. Tonight, a major discussion about Project Horizon from the 1950s. It was a very ambitious effort by the military here in the United States to have space dominance. Of course, they wanted to plant a flag on the moon.
Clyde, how are you, man?
Good to see you, Mike.
This is Leland.
Clyde, I'm Leland, man.
Leland,
Nice
good to
to meet
see you.
you.
Good to meet
Pleasure.
you, too.
All
You
right.
bet.
Thanks for bringing us over.
Oh, it's good to have you guys here. This is where it all starts, so.
Mission control.
It is. It's mission control. It's a lot like what you're used to.
You know, a little bit more than what I'm used to.
Right. I'm known as the guy, at times, the guy that questions the 1969 moon landing. You know, there were the rumors that before the moon landing, to put a moon base up there.
So militarizing the moon?
Yeah.
Is that what?
It was a military objective in the beginning to have an outpost on the moon, and it was called Horizon.
Is there any proof that this happened? And you have something?
Yeah, I have declassified documents right here that show that the proposal began in the 1950s. I believe 1957, 1958. First, a dream of Wernher von Braun, already discussed by the Russians long before that.
Wernher von Braun was an aerospace engineer who designed rockets for Germany during World War II and later became the pioneer and architect of the U.S. space program.
This is before Kennedy. This was even before NASA was formed.
Clyde is presenting documentation for the earliest plans of the moon mission. But I haven't seen anything disproving the moon landing in 1969.
Clyde, if they're this desperate to get to the moon, that they were willing to invest this amount of money and time and effort, and this is actually, you know, in some ways, it's a more ambitious project than even Apollo was.
Well, that's exactly right. It was an ambitious project. We're looking at 250,000 miles out. I think a lot of people don't understand that that's how far the moon is. You know, the technology at the time was same equivalent as a toaster oven. Pretty, you know, primitive. I mean, we have more advanced technology in our cell phones.
But why do you think we would fake it?
PR. The Russians actually were ahead of us in the space program long before we landed anything on the moon. We were racing to the moon. We wanted to show dominance. I mean, we were like the fat kid on the track looking at the athlete going, I'm going to run a race. I'm going to beat you.
I want to be like him.
I want to be like him. You got to understand, what if we sent Armstrong to the moon, and he walks off the limb and immediately gets sucked into the moon, and he's like grasping for air, and here it is on national TV. They wouldn't want that, would they?
I'm trying not to laugh here. This is a radio host telling a former astronaut that NASA didn't have solid data on the gravity of the moon and atmospherics.
There is no doubt that we fired 3 astronauts into space. 400, 500 miles out before the Van Allen belt. They could be orbiting around. While down on the planet, we have a nice studio set aside to keep the astronauts from making any big mistakes or anything going on. Imagine this. The astronauts are kind of like orbiting up there, and then they splash back down again, and no one is the wiser. They had to make sure they covered every single base, including having a good PR situation going on with no one dying on the moon.
For 24 years, I worked for NASA. And throughout the course of those 24 years, I have seen the utmost in integrity, especially with our space program. And there is a huge PR machine at NASA to make things look good for American public and everything, but they've sacrificed their families, their children, everything to do this thing as Americans. But to say that it didn't happen in '69.
Is there anything in history that you question? Do you believe that all these things started the way they told you? Do you believe that history told you the truth?
I think there's revisionist history.
You know, and that's the thing, is that it's people who manipulate the story, and when you question the manipulation, immediately you're a villain for doing so. No, I'm doing it because I want to believe. I want to believe that my astronauts didn't lie to me. In fact, my heart tells me they didn't. But my brain is engaging now, and my confusion is there. There are so many things I have questions about that when I question, immediately people get pissed off. Now, why is that?
I think some people get pissed off because of the sacrifices that we lost these lives.
Right.
And then someone is pissing over the graves. I guess being so close to it and listening to John Young, this man of utmost integrity. I would walk my dogs around to his house, and he would pet my dogs on the head, and we would have these discussions about him walking on the moon. And I just There is no way that I could ever see a man like that lying.
It happened, but not the way they said it did.
So you're calling John Young a liar?
No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm saying
if you say it didn't happen and John Young told me that it did.
It didn't happen the way they said it did.
He said it did. In '69, we landed on the moon.
NASA stands for never a straight answer, and it's always been that way.
Ooh, wow.
Don't punch him. I'm glad they stopped when they did. Clyde clearly got under his skin and kept pushing.
I don't know if you noticed, but I was starting to get a little bit upset because...
Yeah, I did, yeah.
How dare he insult my integrity and the integrity of those that have worked so hard, and actually those who have died. I met Neil Armstrong, I know Buzz Aldrin. You know, these people are they've worked their butts off.
Regardless if it upsets Leland or not, I still question whether we went to the moon.
Clyde Lewis really ticked me off, but he did have declassified documents backing up some of his claims. That tells me that the investigations that Mike, Chad, and I are doing are valuable for people on both sides of the conspiracy theory.
Clyde brought up Wernher von Braun. He's central to a huge conspiracy theory about the government's lies and cover-ups related to our race to space.
I keep on coming across suspicious information in my research. Operation Paperclip.
When I saw his name on one of the documents, I was shocked.
Would we have gone to space without these Nazi scientists and engineers?
The conspiracy theory is alive and well, and so is our investigation. I keep on coming across suspicious information. Operation Paperclip. One of the more intriguing stories lurking behind the moon landing. Apparently, a secret U.S. government operation back in the 1950s to bring former Nazi scientists...
Nazis?
Yes, into the U.S. to help start the space program. At the start of World War II, German engineers were already developing rockets for space exploration. But then the command from the Third Reich was, make these rockets into weapons. This led to the development of the V-2 in the late 1930s. It was a game changer, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. The German rocketeers had learned to generate enough thrust to deliver one-ton payloads of high explosive 200 miles across the European continent. The Germans were building these rocket missiles at a breakneck speed. The V-2 was such an effective delivery system that it provided the basis for the present-day Scud missile.
I 100% believe that the U.S. was so desperate to beat the Soviets to the moon that they would recruit Nazis to gain access to their technologies. I've seen the evidence that proves this.
You can't tell me that our country's leadership would bring in active war criminals to aid America's race to the moon.
I've located someone that first uncovered this story, so we're going to Florida. Whatever Operation Paperclip was, it involves the earliest days of the space program. We're meeting with the investigative reporter who broke the story of the U.S. government bringing Nazis into the space program. So we're getting ready to go talk to Linda Hunt, former reporter.
Where was she a reporter?
CNN.
Under paperclip policy, war criminals and ardent Nazis were supposed to have been excluded. This is Dieter Grau, who, like most of those under investigation, lives in Huntsville, where he worked for NASA as director of a lab at the Marshall Space Flight Center.
I promised that I wouldn't make any further statements on the subject.
I've known about Linda for years. She's won awards for her investigative journalism. I want Chad and Leland to hear how America recruited not just German engineers, but Nazi party engineers to help get the U.S. to the moon.
If this is true, and they were working side by side with Nazis to get into space, that casts a huge shadow over NASA.
Hello.
Hello.
We really appreciate you being able to speak to us today.
We understand you broke the Operation Paperclip story. Can you share a little bit of how that took place and how you broke that story?
I had a reputation as being somewhat of a tenacious journalist. Around 89, 90, I heard a rumor that they brought Nazis over for Paperclip to work in the space program. In the National Archives, some of the records were there. So I started declassifying the files of the Germans who were brought over. It was a long struggle. I mean, it was terrible.
So what did you have to do to uncover all the details about this part of it?
Hardcore research, which I love. A lot of library research, backgrounding, and then went after the records.
Mm-hmm. How many people were brought over on Operation Paperclip?
1,500.
1,500 people. Scientists, engineers, I mean...
Chemical warfare, Air Force. The myth was that these people were carefully checked and they didn't bring any war criminals or bad people over. The minute I got some of the records, it was obvious that, you know, it wasn't true. The records contain background investigations done in Germany by Army intelligence, which revealed a lot about their Nazi past, which they covered up. They brought Nazis over to be able to go to the moon. They brought von Braun and 100 more to work in the space program.
When Allied forces captured the Germans' V-2 rocket complex in 1944, von Braun and more than 100 of his top engineers had already worked out a deal to get themselves to the U.S. As part of Operation Paperclip, the team of Nazi rocketeers was installed at Fort Bliss, Texas, to begin work designing rockets for the U.S. Army. Paperclip was a top-secret endeavor orchestrated under the Joint Chiefs of Staff and carried out by Army counterintelligence.
Wernher von Braun was really admired at NASA for his role in the space program. When I saw his name on one of the documents, I was shocked. Von Braun's file, the records that I got were copies, but not the originals. I think they'd been destroyed.
Why do you think those records of von Braun were destroyed by our U.S. government?
Because they showed he was a member of the SS. Frightening, frightening. They just covered it up.
The question as to what nation, to what victorious nation we are willing to entrust this brainchild of ours was a moral decision more than anything else.
He was a major in the SS.
How did you find that out?
I got a tip.
And I'm assuming that tip was within the military, correct?
I know nothing. Here's his SS record.
NASA, the same agency that I trained and worked for, recruited Nazis to develop the very same technologies that I would utilize decades later. This is truly disturbing. It's really hard to come to terms with this. Would we have gone to space without these Nazi scientists and engineers?
The test results that could disprove everything we believe about the 1969 moon landing.
So the capsules were made out of aluminum. We're going to show the blocking power of aluminum.
Would we have gone to space without these Nazi scientists and engineers?
I don't think so. It's hard for me to say that, but I don't think so, to be honest. Our people weren't trained like that. They didn't have the expertise, they didn't have the knowledge or the experience. Von Braun and the group provided a base of education for them to be able to go to the moon. It's a real dilemma. It's the end justifies the means.
Do you think that was worth it?
A survivor of the concentration camp. I asked him that question, and I'll give you his answer. Maybe, but they should have paid a little bit for their crime.
I tell you what, I'm kind of wrestling with knowing what our government was willing to overlook in order to meet its objective of trying to get to the moon first.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was surprised that we've got Nazis helping us get to the moon. What Linda told us was really shocking. I had no idea how desperate we were to catch up with the Soviets in the space race.
Less than 20 years after the Nuremberg trials that sentenced Nazis to death and imprisonment, other known members of the Nazi Party and SS were collecting government paychecks from NASA. If NASA can cover up a secret this big, who knows what else they've hidden from the public? Were they capable of faking the moon landing and keeping that hoax a secret as well? What Linda told us really makes you believe that NASA has some dark secrets.
This is why conspiracy theorists think NASA has been feeding us a litany of lies for decades.
Look, even if true that we use former Nazis, it is so disturbing. But it doesn't mean that we didn't go to the moon.
I'm going to call BS. What it shows is that America is willing to lie about things that it's ashamed of, and letting down the late JFK's promise to get to the moon seems pretty shameful to me. When von Braun transferred to NASA in 1960, he made acquaintance with friend and colleague James Van Allen.
In 1958, James Van Allen, analyzing data from satellite missions, discovered two enormous belts of high radiation surrounding the planet, trapped in place by Earth's magnetic field.
And these Van Allen belts are the foundation of another major conspiracy theory. Look, if NASA was willing to work with our former enemies, the Germans, some of whom may have even been war criminals, it seems to me that it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to assume that they were willing to take big risks with the astronauts being irradiated by the Van Allen belts.
Will a combination of radiation and weightlessness be a hazard on long-duration manned spaceflights?
The strength of the radiation is so powerful, scientists at first thought they recorded a Soviet nuclear test. These belts were a huge potential threat to our astronauts. The intense radiation could have shot through them like an atomic cannonball, causing lethal genetic breakdown.
Radioactivity is measured in rads, and 300 rads can be a lethal dose. The Van Allen belt has been gauged at thousands and thousands of rads. The threat that it presents is very real. This is not X-ray level radiation. The amount of radiation in those belts would burn skin, melt bones, and void the human DNA structure of those astronauts.
The inner Van Allen belt, at an altitude roughly 600 miles above the Earth, has a lot of really dangerous proton particles, flux alpha particles. But the outer belt, from 8,400 to 36,000 miles in space, is possibly deadlier, with an extremely high flux of electrons, or beta particles. This is the subatomic radiation that penetrates skin and body tissue.
It was only recently that scientists discovered that there was less radiation than imagined in certain parts of the Van Allen belts. In the 1960s, what could possibly make NASA think they could rocket through them? The alternative, if they decided that that risk wasn't worth it, maybe they would make another choice. Maybe they would choose not to go at all. The primary conspiracy theory is that Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins circled the planet in a low Earth orbit while a staged moon landing film aired, and then they splashed back down to Earth afterwards. Maybe we never went through the Van Allen belts. Maybe there was no moon landing.
We need to solve this mystery. Our team is going to see the Apollo 11 capsule and investigate whether its construction is substantial enough to have survived Van Allen belt radiation. If it is, that could help prove that the craft made it through the belts, protecting the astronauts and even getting them all the way to the moon.
Engineers at NASA know exactly what they're doing. On Earth, the atmosphere and magnetic field can protect us from space radiation. But aluminum and other materials used in those spacecraft were able to absorb a lot of that radiation.
That protection is what some question. So that's why we're here in Seattle. We actually have the opportunity to get eyes on a really unique artifact. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, the actual Apollo 11 capsule is touring the country.
That's the capsule that Neil, Buzz, and Michael flew home in.
Roger, we got you coming home.
So let's go see the capsule.
Let's go see the
That is awesome. We actually have the opportunity to get eyes on a really unique artifact.
Bring it. I have never seen the capsule. This makes me really excited. I have absolutely no doubt that the engineers at NASA researched and tested again and got this design exactly right.
Chad has arranged for us to scan the Apollo capsule to find out just how protected the astronauts were when they traveled through the radiation of the Van Allen belts.
This is pretty cool.
This is really cool.
Destination Moon.
Look at that, they got an SR-71 and everything.
We're investigating the claim that radioactivity in space made it too dangerous to send astronauts to the moon.
Well, yeah, I mean, the argument is that if we really went to the moon, you would require so much shielding that basically the spacecraft would be too heavy to get off the ground. You'd never get to the moon and get back, because you're talking about these two very, very intense belts of very highly charged protons that are just going to put out so much radiation that it would basically fry the astronauts inside. And the argument is that you would need like up to a foot of lead shielding.
So I'm willing to investigate this. But dude, you know I've been to space, right?
Right, but in low Earth orbit, you didn't go through the Van
But you're gonna
Allen.
have to convince me of this.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, and that's why we're here. Let's go take a look at the
Let's go
capsule.
find out.
All right.
Okay.
So there it is. That is awesome.
To think, 3 astronauts traveled to the moon and back in that tiny capsule, setting in motion all the events that would come next and change my life. This command module was developed and built for NASA to be the mothership of the Apollo 11 spacecraft.
Ignition sequence start.
The 13,000-pound capsule is about 10 feet high and less than 13 feet at its maximum diameter. An incredibly tight space for 3 men to live and work for 8 days. In total, its panels have 24 instruments, 566 switches, 40 event indicators, and 71 lights.
Apollo 11, Houston, how did it go? Over. Go CLR, Charlie.
Learning from the tragedy of the Apollo 1 fire, NASA had this module designed with a hatch that could open outward in 5 seconds. Earlier designs could take up to 90 seconds to open.
The capsule is constructed of a stainless steel outer shell, surrounding an inner shell of aluminum with several inches of fiberglass insulation between. Since the 5,000-degree heat of reentry could melt most metals, the outer shell also had a resin shield designed to char and melt off, absorbing and carrying away much of that heat in the process.
Roger, we got you coming home.
Before splashing down in the Pacific Ocean.
So, you know, nobody disputes that this spacecraft went to space. What they dispute is whether it went to the moon and back, whether it could have survived the radiation environment in space.
We're gonna prove that.
While I have my suspicions, this is still really cool. The capsule that actually took Neil, Mike, and Buzz to space and possibly to the moon.
Because we're not allowed to touch it, let alone get inside the capsule to see how thick it is, I've arranged for a team to come over. We'll be able to see how much shielding exists inside the capsule. Whenever I need high-tech gear for investigations, I call in specialists like Darren McDougall. Since we're not allowed to touch it, Darren's LiDAR scanner can compute the thickness of the capsule walls for us. Here's Darren with the scanner. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you. We're really excited you have the scanner here. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how it actually works?
Sure, it's a LiDAR scanner, light detection and ranging. It's gonna take positions around here and it's gonna actually create a 3D model on a computer.
All right, wonderful. Well, let's see it go to use. LiDAR is the same technology used in laser guidance, archaeology, high-res map making, and in driverless cars.
Light, sure.
The footage will get an exact read on just how protected the astronauts were when traveling through the Van Allen belts.
Non-contacting, non-destructive, but can get out information that's going to maybe help us solve this mystery.
Yeah.
Just looking at it, it doesn't look like there's the lead I think it would need to pass through the Van Allen belts.
We're going to head back to the Situation Room and analyze the results. It hinges on whether there was enough protection to safeguard the astronauts. And that's actually something we can test. That has radioactive stickers. How dangerous is that right now? I gotta tell you, the outer skin was so ravaged by the return burn into the Earth's atmosphere. I was pretty shocked.
I feel like, given the radiation out there, there needs to be at least a foot of lead making up the capsule walls to protect the astronauts.
You know, I remember those returns on the space shuttle traveling at 17,500 miles per hour. Re-entering the atmosphere, that shuttle heated up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, you know, re-entry is challenging for any spacecraft, there's no question about that, but the real issue here is the amount of shielding that would be necessary to go through the Van Allen belts. I mean, that's really the point of contention.
I gotta tell you, the results were staggering. Less than 3 inches of steel and aluminum.
Okay, so 3 inches, that's like, wow. It's pretty obvious that there was no way there was enough shielding for them to be protected going through the Van Allen belts. The walls of the capsule were just not thick enough to stop it. Maybe there was no moon landing.
So the idea, if there's not enough shielding, is that evidence that we didn't go to the moon? Okay, 3 inches is pretty surprising, but I'm sure there's an explanation. Maybe there is another way to test this theory.
Really, it hinges on whether there was enough protection to safeguard the astronauts. And that's actually something we can test. There's a team that's investigating how much protection is really needed for the Van Allen belt radiation.
We're heading to the Carnegie Institution for Science, where we'll test the radiation effects on a space capsule.
Whenever my investigations require analysis of energy and radiation, I go to Michael Walter and his team at Carnegie to break down the information. We're gonna need to test just how dangerous the Van Allen belt radiation was before we can draw any conclusions. We're really wanting to see what risks are posed by the radiation going through the Van Allen belts.
Right. There was a lot of radiation exposure or potential during the Apollo missions, and the Van Allen belts are, of course, a big part of that. And so a lot of the conspiracy crowd have argued that in order to survive the radiation intensity that the astronauts went through, the thing would have to be built out of a lot stronger material, you know, shielded with lead, that it simply wasn't possible to go through without getting burnt to a crisp. What exactly does it take to block the radiation of the Van Allen belts?
We need to understand what that radiation is all about. These are particles, and these particles are 3 kinds: protons, electrons, or beta particles, and alpha particles, which are 2 protons and 2 neutrons. The inner Van Allen belt has a lot of proton flux, and it's very dangerous. So what NASA did was simply avoid it, because it's relatively smaller and you can manage to get around it. But you can't get around the outer belt, and the outer belt has a very high flux of beta particles. Those are electrons. So what we're going to do today is test the material that the spacecraft was made of was sufficient to block most of the radiation, and that the radiation that did get through wasn't lethal because the time spent in the radiation belt was relatively short.
What you're saying basically is it's not just the intensity of the radiation or the type of the radiation, it's also the exposure time that matters.
Exactly. So we have a plexiglass mock-up of the capsule. We have 2 different kinds of radiation sources here that emulate the kind of radiation that exists in the outer Van Allen belt, which is what the capsule went through.
That has radioactive stickers. How dangerous is that right now?
These aren't dangerous. The flux is so low that it's much, much less than getting an X-ray at a dental office.
All right, just caution, radioactive material kind of alerts my senses.
Of course. Here is our alpha particle emitter. It's radioactive. and you can hear all the counts going into that Geiger counter. It's about a millirad per hour.
I'm curious to see what this radiation test shows us because it will definitively tell us whether or not the astronauts could have survived a trip through the Van Allen radiation belts.
So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the stopping power of just the plexiglass in our mock-up capsule here.
Dr. Walter is placing his plexiglass replica of the Apollo 11 capsule on top of the radioactive pellet. He's going to measure how much radiation gets through the barrier.
Put that there. Here's our capsule. We'll lower our Geiger counter in. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the stopping power of just the plexiglass in our mock-up capsule here.
We're testing if the materials the Apollo 11 capsule was made of would be able to withstand a lethal dose of radiation from the Van Allen belts.
Put that there.
If this scaled-down test of these materials cannot block significant levels of radiation, it means the astronauts did not go to the moon.
Here's our capsule.
The Van Allen belts have been gauged at millions upon millions of millirads. Even a scaled-down test like this can determine the percentage of radiation that gets blocked.
The disk is emitting a low dose of radioactive protons, or alpha particles, approximately 1 millirad worth. Not enough to be harmful, but we're going to see how much can get through a piece of plexiglass.
And we're getting a couple of counts, 0.05 millirads per hour.
With a simple piece of plastic, we're able to drop the radioactivity of alpha particles by 99%.
In terms of the alpha particles, no problem. So now let's test the beta particles. There's a much higher flux of beta particles in the Van Allen belt, and they're much smaller. They're electrons, and so they can penetrate through material.
So this is a crucial test. Since beta particles have a much easier time breaking through protective surfaces, they posed a much greater danger to the astronauts.
We are going to put the highest flux that we can in here.
Highest flux meaning?
Meaning the most electrons
possible.
So we've got a whole bunch of disks here emitting beta particles, and you can see that the flux is about 2 millirads per hour, so considerably higher than what we had with the alpha particles. Okay, so now we're going to look at the blocking power of a thin layer of plexiglass. Okay, so now we're down to about 0.9 to 1. So we've blocked about half of them.
Half of the beta particles are still getting through, and last time I checked, they don't cover you with a plastic-lined apron when you go get an X-ray at the dentist. They cover you with a lead-lined apron.
There are some conspiracy theories saying that the capsule needed to be made of lead in order to stop any of these particles from penetrating. What is your thoughts behind that?
Well, lead would be great because it's very dense, and so it would stop all these particles in their tracks. The problem is it's really, really heavy, and you would never get the spacecraft off the ground. So the capsules were made out of two materials. The inner shell was made out of aluminum, and then there was an outer shell that was made of steel. So what we're going to do here is we're going to show the blocking power of aluminum.
Now we're getting to a test of the actual material used on Apollo 11. This is what we came to find out. 3 inches of aluminum and steel provide enough of a barrier against space radiation.
So I've got an aluminum plate, which is about 2 millimeters thick. And if you lift that up, we'll put one plate over the discs. And now the counts are down to about 0.1 or 0.2 millirads per hour.
Wow. So you've blocked everything in terms of the particles that are the most dangerous in the outer Van Allen belt with just plexiglass and a little bit of aluminum.
Right. Well, there you go. Science wins again. All of these conspiracy theorists should have really done their homework before they started doubting the talented men and women of NASA that did send Apollo 11 to the moon.
There's no doubt that before the first time that they went through, that there was an unquantified risk to going through the Van Allen belt. But what NASA knew is that they had mapped the Van Allen belt to a degree where they knew where the hot spots were and the areas of the lowest radiation flux. And so they planned their trajectories in such a way to have the minimum exposure. There were a lot of risks with the moon missions. Just getting off the ground, making it up into orbit, putting somebody on the moon and getting them off, those were all much higher risks than the risks of going through the Van Allen belt.
Okay, that's why we do the test. But, like Dr. Walter said, there are plenty of other risks. So this test doesn't completely close the book on NASA faking the moon landing. You don't need lead shielding to go to the moon.
You don't need lead shielding to go to the moon.
I think the radiation test was awfully convincing. With just a thin sheet of aluminum, it stopped 99% of the alpha and beta radiation.
The science demonstrated it. And there's all types of radiation out there. Some of it's not harmful, but if it is, agencies like NASA, with all their scientists and engineers, can figure out how much shielding we need.
Yeah, look, 1%, you get a higher dose of radiation than that just by flying to Denver and stepping off an airplane into the sunshine. So I think we can pretty much say that the idea that the Van Allen radiation belts would stop us from going to the moon is all BS. All right, so the scientific proof that I saw changed my mind. We could have made it safely through the Van Allen belt, but that still doesn't prove that we actually made it to the moon in '69. There is one other thing I'd like to bring up with you guys. Did you know that we've only scratched the surface? There are endless conspiracy theories out there.
Here we go.
Maybe there was no moon landing.
All right, our investigations continue.